Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
Picture this. A barren world, forgotten by the Imperium, its name lost to the archives of time. The surface is scarred by ancient conflicts, pockmarked with craters that have filled with toxic rain over the centuries, creating pools of iridescent liquid that bubble and hiss under an alien sun. The sky is the color of rust, perpetually choked with dust from the constant winds that scour the broken landscape. This is a world that has seen war before, many times, and the bones of those conflicts lie scattered across its surface like the discarded toys of angry gods. Into this desolation comes an Ork warband, their ramshackle ships descending through the atmosphere with all the grace of falling bricks. They crash land with explosive enthusiasm, leaving fresh scars on a planet already covered in them. These are the greenskins. And they've come here following rumors of good scrap and better fights. The war boss leading them is a massive specimen named Grokfang, his body a patchwork of scars and crude bionics, his weapons cobbled together from a dozen different sources. He's heard tales of an old battlefield on this world, and where there are old battles, there's old loot. The Orks spread across the wasteland like a green tide, their mobs of boys whooping and hollering as they search for anything worth taking. Gretchens scurry between them, prodded along by their larger cousins, their beady eyes scanning for anything shiny or useful. The mech boys, those rare Orks, blessed with an instinctive understanding of machinery, lead expeditions to the most promising sites. They can smell technology the way a predator smells blood, are drawn to it by senses that go beyond mere sight or sound. It's one of these mech boy expeditions, led by a particularly cunning specimen named Grisnak, that makes the discovery. They're digging through what looks like the collapsed remains of an imperial fortification, the rockcrete walls long since crumbled, but still bearing the faded aquila that marks them as human construction. The Gretchen are doing most of the actual digging, their small hands useful for sorting through rubble, when one of them stumbles backwards with a squeal. There, revealed by the removal of centuries of accumulated debris, is a piece of ceramite armor. But this isn't the thin plating of a standard Imperial vehicle or the scattered fragments of a long-dead soldier. This is thick, heavy, adorned with purity seals that have somehow survived the millennia, albeit faded and brittle. Grisnak pushes the panicking Gretchen aside and examines the find with eyes that gleam with avarice and professional interest. More digging reveals more of the object. It's massive, far larger than any Ork, and it's clearly been here for an incredibly long time. The soil around it has compressed and hardened, almost fusing with the lower portions of the machine. Plant life, such as it is on this dead world, has tried to claim it. Tough vines wrapped around protrusions and dried into rope-like coils. But underneath all that, underneath the dirt and time and decay, Grisnak can see what he's found. A Dreadnought. An Imperial space marine. Dreadnought. Buried and forgotten. Entombed not in the sacred halls of a chapter monastery, but in the uncaring earth of a forsaken world. The mech boy's mind, such as it is, races with possibilities. He's seen Dreadnoughts before, of course. Every Ork who's fought the Space Marines has encountered these walking tombs, has felt the earth shake under their tread, and heard the thunder of their weapons. Some of his mob have fallen to Dreadnoughts, crushed under mighty fists or vaporized by Lascanon fire. But to find one here, alone, dormant, possibly defenseless, this is a prize beyond measure. Grisnak bellows for more Gretchen, more diggers, more hands to clear away the debris. The news spreads through the Ork encampment like wildfire. Boys abandon their own searches to come see this marvel. Even Grokfang himself arrives, his heavy footfalls causing small avalanches in the loose soil as he approaches the dig site. The war boss looks down at the partially excavated Dreadnought, and a grin splits his scarred face. This, he thinks, is why they came to this world. This is the loot they were meant to find. Understanding the greenskins. To understand what happens next, you need to understand the Orks. They're not like other races in the galaxy. They're not motivated by survival or profit or the pursuit of knowledge. They're not driven by faith in gods or loyalty to empires or the desire to protect their homes. Orks are driven by something far simpler and far more primal. They exist for one purpose, hardwired into every cell of their fungal biology. They exist to fight. But it's more than just combat that drives them. Orks live in a state of perpetual enthusiasm for warfare that borders on the religious. They love the sound of gunfire and the clash of blades. They love the smell of promethium and the sight of explosions. They love the adrenaline rush of a charge and the satisfaction of a good scrap won. For an orc, war isn't a necessary evil or a last resort. War is joy. War is purpose. War is life itself. This mentality shapes everything about orc society. Their entire culture revolves around fighting. The strongest orc leads because he can beat up anyone who challenges him. The smartest orc gets respect because his inventions make better dakka, which means better fights. The fastest orc is admired because speed means getting into combat quicker. Everything, absolutely everything, comes back to the fundamental orc truth that fighting is good and more fighting is better. But orcs aren't mindless, far from it. They're cunning in their own way. Possessed of a low animal cunning that makes them dangerous opponents, despite their seemingly simple nature. They understand tactics, at least in a crude sense. They know that surrounding an enemy is better than charging straight on, even if charging straight on is more fun. They know that having more dakka is better than having less dakka. They know that a good ambush can win a fight before it properly starts, though they generally prefer to announce their presence with a roar and hail of bullets. This cunning extends to their relationship with technology. Orcs are natural scavengers and looters. They'll take anything that isn't nailed down, and if it is nailed down, they'll just take the nails too. But it's not random theft. Orcs have an instinctive sense of what's useful and what isn't. They can look at a pile of scrap and see a weapon. They can examine a destroyed vehicle and know which parts are worth salvaging. This isn't learned knowledge passed down through generations. It's genetic, hardwired into them by the ancient beings called the Old Ones, who created the Orcs' ancestors millions of years ago. The Old Ones needed warriors for their war against the Necrons and their star-eating gods, the Sea Tan. So they created the Krork, massive intelligent warriors who combined biological resilience with technological sophistication. The Krork were reportedly up to 12 meters tall, armored in sophisticated power armor, wielding weapons that would make modern Imperial tech priests weep with envy. They were perfect soldiers for the war in heaven, that ancient conflict that nearly destroyed the galaxy. But the war in heaven ended. The Old Ones disappeared or died or transcended to some higher state of being, and without their creators to guide them, the Krork began to devolve. Over millions of years, they became smaller, simpler, more scattered. They became orcs, but they retained certain traits from their origins. The ability to reproduce through spores, ensuring that killing one orc could lead to dozens more sprouting from the ground where he fell. The capacity for violence that made them deadly combatants. And most importantly for our purposes, the genetic knowledge of technology. This genetic knowledge manifests most strongly in the odd boys, orcs born with specialized instincts. Pain boys know surgery the way other beings know breathing. Weird boys channel the psychic energy of nearby orcs whether they want to or not. And mech boys, the most important for this tale, understand machines with an almost supernatural intuition. A mech boy doesn't learn to build a shooter the way a human might study engineering. He just knows. The knowledge wells up from somewhere deep in his genetic memory, instructions encoded in his very DNA. He knows that if you attach this barrel to this firing mechanism and jam in some bullets, you'll get something that shoots. It might not be pretty, it might not be sophisticated, it might violate a dozen laws of physics, but it'll work. And that's all that matters to an orc. But here's where it gets really strange. Orc technology shouldn't work, at least not according to Imperial tech priests who've studied captured Ork weapons and vehicles. The mechanisms are too crude, the tolerances too loose, the entire assembly too haphazard. Yet Ork guns fire, Ork vehicles run, Ork aircraft somehow stay aloft, despite having the aerodynamic properties of a brick. How? The answer lies in the collective psychic field that all Orks generate. Individually, Orks aren't powerful psychers. They don't shoot lightning from their hands or read minds. But collectively, when enough Orks gather together, they create a gestalt field that subtly alters reality around them. This field doesn't create effects from nothing. It's not that powerful. But it can nudge things, smooth over impossibilities, make the improbable merely unlikely. If an Ork believes strongly enough that his gun will fire, and enough other Orks believe it too, then the gun will fire. The collective belief makes it real. This extends to other aspects of Ork culture as well. Orks believe that red things go faster. And so, vehicles painted red actually do move quicker when enough Orks are around. They believe that purple is the color of stealth, so purple-painted Orks are harder to spot. They believe that big guns make bigger explosions, so their oversized weapons pack more punch than their crude construction should allow. Reality itself bends, just slightly, to accommodate Ork belief. This doesn't mean an Ork can believe anything into existence. A mech boy still needs to build something that at least resembles a functional weapon. The parts need to be roughly correct. The assembly needs to be approximately right. But where human technology requires precision to the millimeter, Ork technology just needs to be close enough. The psychic field fills in the gaps, makes up for the imperfections, forces reality to accept what should be impossible. Different Ork clans have different approaches to warfare, colored by their cultural tendencies. The Goths are the most straightforward, believing that the best way to fight is to hit things very hard until they stop moving. The Bad Moons have the most teeth, the Ork currency, and thus can afford the best weapons and the flashiest gear. The Evil Sons are obsessed with speed, painting everything red and racing into battle on bikes and buggies. The Blood Axes are the sneakiest, willing to use tactics, and even occasionally trade with other races. The Death Skulls are the greatest looters, believing that blue is the luckiest color and stealing everything that isn't bolted down. But regardless of clan, all Orks share certain traits. They're tough, able to survive wounds that would kill a human and regenerate from injuries that would cripple other species. They're strong, their muscles dense and powerful, capable of feats of strength that seem impossible for beings their size. And they're enthusiastic, approaching every fight with a joy that's both infectious and terrifying. When an Ork warband descends on a world, they don't just fight, they revel in it. They laugh as they charge into enemy fire. They whoop with joy as they close with the foe. They sing crude songs as they swing their choppers, celebrating the violence with every blow. It's not madness exactly. It's simply that Orks are doing what they were made to do, and they love every second of it. This is the species that has found the buried Dreadnought. These are the beings who now surround it, and eyeing it with a mixture of greed and professional interest. And this is where our story truly begins. The ancient sleeper. But what have the Orks actually found? To understand the magnitude of their discovery, we need to understand what a Dreadnought truly is. Because it's not just a machine, not simply a weapon or a vehicle. A Dreadnought is a tomb, a prison, a life support system, and a walking embodiment of duty that transcends death itself. In the distant past, before this Dreadnought was buried, it was a space marine. Perhaps he was a sergeant leading his squad into battle against Xenos raiders. Perhaps he was a captain commanding his company from the front lines. Perhaps he was simply a battle brother who had served his chapter faithfully for decades or centuries. His name is lost now, ground away by time and neglect. But once it was spoken with respect in the halls of his chapter's fortress monastery. He fell in battle, as all space marines eventually do. The details don't matter, not anymore. Maybe it was an Ork power claw that crushed his spine. Maybe it was elder poison that ravaged his organs. Maybe it was a tyrannid creature that tore him apart, leaving only fragments of flesh that somehow, impossibly, still clung to life. What matters is that he was too damaged to ever fight again as a mortal being, but too valuable to simply let die. Space Marines are not easy to make. The process of creating one is long, expensive, and has a high failure rate. You start with a young recruit, usually a boy in his early teens, chosen for both physical potential and psychological resilience. Then you subject him to years of conditioning, hypno-indoctrination, and surgical modification. You implant him with gene seed, the precious biological material that contains the genetic legacy of his chapter's Primarch. You give him a second heart, a third lung, an extra kidney, organs that let him spit acid and breathe underwater and survive in hard vacuum for short periods. You make him stronger, faster, tougher than any normal human could ever be. And even after all that, even after the years of training and the pain of transformation, you still don't have a veteran warrior. That takes decades of combat experience, of battles fought and enemies slain, of tactical knowledge gained through hard-won victories and bitter defeats. A Space Marine with a century of combat experience is a treasure to his chapter. A Space Marine with multiple centuries of service is irreplaceable. Their deaths diminish their chapters in ways that go beyond simple numbers. So when a precious veteran falls but doesn't quite die, when his body is shattered but his mind remains intact, his chapter has a choice. They can let him fade away, granting him the peace of death and the honor of a warrior's funeral. Or they can inter him in a dreadnought, binding what's left of him to a machine that will let him continue serving long after his flesh has failed. The process is horrific. Tech priests cut away the ruined portions of the Marine's body, keeping only what's absolutely necessary. Usually this means the torso, containing the vital organs, and the head, containing the brain and sensory organs. Sometimes not even that much remains. Sometimes all that's left is a brain in a jar, preserved in amniotic fluid, but connected to the machine through a maze of wires and tubes. These pitiful remains are encased in an armored sarcophagus, a sealed chamber that maintains the Marine's life through a combination of medical technology and biomechanical interfacing. Life support systems regulate his breathing, his circulation, his metabolism. Neural interfaces connect his brain directly to the Dreadnought systems, letting him see through its sensors, hear through its pickups, move its limbs as if they were his own. But this connection comes at a terrible cost. The neural load of controlling something as complex as a Dreadnought is immense, putting strain on the pilot's mind that accumulates over time. Confusion sets in. Memories blur and fade. Personality traits erode away like sand in wind. The longer a Marine is interred, the less human he becomes. Until sometimes, all that remains is a focused will to fight and nothing more. This is why Dreadnoughts spend most of their time in stasis, sealed in chambers, deep within their chapter's fortress monastery. They're only awakened when the need is dire, when their firepower and experience are absolutely necessary. And even then, the awakenings are kept as brief as possible, just long enough to complete the mission, before the Dreadnought is returned to its cold sleep. Some Dreadnoughts have been asleep for centuries at a time, awakened only once in 100 years or more. The oldest have been fighting for 10,000 years, their pilots having served since the time of the Horus Heresy, that great civil war that nearly destroyed the Imperium. The physical form of a Dreadnought is equally impressive. They stand around 4 meters tall, are massive armored shells of ceramite and adamantium. Their structure consists of a central sarcophagus containing the pilot, surrounded by armor plating thick enough to withstand weapons that would vaporize a normal vehicle. Electrofiber bundles serve as muscles, contracting and expanding to move the limbs with surprising agility for something so large. Power cells feed energy to weapon systems and motive units, allowing the Dreadnought to function for extended periods without resupply. The weapons themselves are formidable. A typical Dreadnought mounts at least 2 weapon systems, usually one for close combat and one for ranged fire. The close combat weapon might be a massive power fist, crackling with energy fields that can tear through enemy armor like paper. Or it could be a chain fist, with diamond-tipped teeth, spinning at thousands of rotations per minute. Some dreadnoughts carry assault cannons, rapid-fire weapons that can chew through infantry, and light vehicles with equal ease. Others mount lascannons, coherent light beams capable of punching through the thickest armor. Missile launchers, plasma cannons, heavy bolters, the list goes on. Different patterns of dreadnought have different capabilities and different looks. The Castroferrum pattern is the most common, that boxy, utilitarian design that's been in service for millennia. The Contemptor pattern is older, sleeker, more advanced, a relic from the Horus Heresy era that few chapters still possess. The Redemptor pattern is newer, larger, more aggressive, though it burns through its pilots at an accelerated rate due to the increased neural load, as each has its strengths and weaknesses, its devoted followers and its critics. But regardless of pattern, all dreadnoughts share certain characteristics. They're walking tanks, capable of shrugging off fire that would destroy lesser vehicles. They're precision weapons platforms, able to deliver devastating firepower exactly where it's needed. They're terror weapons, their mere presence on the battlefield often enough to break enemy morale. And they're links to the past, living embodiments of their chapter's history and traditions. When a dreadnought speaks, it does so through synthesized vox speakers that give its voice a crackling, artificial quality. But the words are the pilot's own, filtered through centuries or millennia of service. Some dreadnoughts are taciturn, speaking only when necessary, though their long sleeps having eroded their social inclinations. Others are loquacious, eager to share wisdom or stories from battles long past. Some have gone half mad from the isolation and mental strain, their speech wandering and confused. But all carry authority born of age and experience beyond that of any mortal commander. The Space Marines treat their dreadnoughts with immense respect, almost reverence. These are their ancestors, their chapter's greatest heroes, still fighting long after they should have earned their rest. Young Marines listen raptly when a dreadnought speaks of ancient battles. Veterans seek counsel from those who have faced enemies the current generation has never encountered. Chapter masters defer to the wisdom of dreadnoughts whose service spans millennia. So what does it mean that one of these walking relics, one of these armored tombs containing a warrior who may have fought for 1,000 years or more, is buried on a forgotten world? How did it get here? What battle claimed it? And most importantly, what will happen now that the Orks have found it? The dreadnought buried on this world has been here for a long time. The records, if they ever existed, have been lost. Perhaps the battle was never properly documented, the world too insignificant to merit detailed reports. Perhaps the records were destroyed in some subsequent disaster, fire or war, or simple bureaucratic negligence consuming the evidence. Perhaps they're sitting in an archive somewhere, gathering dust, waiting for a clerk who will never come to file them properly. What we can piece together suggests a desperate battle. But the fortification the dreadnought was buried in was Imperial construction, probably a firebase or forward operating base. The scattered debris around the site includes fragments of armor and weapons from both sides, greenskins and humans having clashed here long ago. Something went wrong, badly wrong, and in the chaos the dreadnought fell. Maybe it was damaged beyond the ability to move, its motive systems destroyed, and had to be abandoned when the Imperial forces withdrew. Maybe it ran out of power and went dormant, and the retreat happened too quickly for it to be recovered. Maybe the pilot simply gave up, overwhelmed by the slaughter around him, choosing to shut down rather than continue witnessing the carnage. Whatever the cause, the dreadnought was left behind. And over the centuries, over the millennium, as the world forgot it was there, dirt accumulated, rock settled, plants grew and died and grew again. The elements weathered the exposed portions, until finally it was just another lump in the ground, just another buried piece of debris on a planet covered in the wreckage of forgotten wars. Inside the sarcophagus, the pilot sleeps. Not the clean sleep of stasis, but something deeper, darker. His systems are in minimal power mode, just enough to keep the biomechanical interface from failing completely, just enough to preserve what little flesh remains. He dreams, perhaps, if what happens in that state can be called dreaming. Memories cycle through degraded neural pathways. Battles long past replay behind closed eyes. Voices of dead comrades echo in the darkness. He's been like this for 1,000 years. A millennium of cold, silent waiting. And now, for the first time in all that time, light is starting to filter through the dirt. Vibrations reach the sarcophagus as Gretchen, Dig and Orks shout orders. Power cells that have been dormant for so long begin, just barely, to stir. The ancient sleeper is about to wake. Excavation and examination. The Orks attack the task of excavating the Dreadnought with their characteristic enthusiasm and complete lack of patience. Gretchen are driven into the dig site in swarms, their small bodies useful for getting into tight spaces. They dig with whatever tools are at hand, crude shovels welded together from scrap, their own bare hands, stolen Imperial entrenching tools. The larger Orks supervise, occasionally kicking a Gretchen who isn't working fast enough, is sometimes helping with the heavy lifting when a particularly large chunk of debris needs to be moved. Griznak, the mech boy, circles the excavation site like a shark, his eyes tracking every new detail that emerges from the ground. He's mentally cataloguing what he sees, his genetically encoded knowledge of technology, analyzing the Dreadnought, even as it's revealed. He can see the damage now, blast marks on the armor suggesting it took heavy fire before it fell. There's a crater near what will turn out to be the right leg, probably from an explosive that damaged the motive systems. The sarcophagus itself seems intact though, and that's what matters most. Other mech boys arrive, drawn by word of the find. They argue over the best way to extract the machine without damaging it further. But one suggests using cutting torches to free it from the compacted earth. Another wants to just pull it out with chains attached to a looted Imperial chimera they've got back at camp. A third proposes digging a ramp and letting gravity do the work. The discussion quickly devolves into a shoving match that ends when Griznak, being the one who found it first, asserts his authority with a well-placed headbutt. The excavation takes hours, but time means little to Orks when they're focused on a prize this good. The sun crosses the rusty sky, casting long shadows across the dig site. More of the Dreadnought emerges with each layer of dirt removed. Its weapons are still in place, Griznak notes with satisfaction. The assault cannon on the left arm is clogged with dirt and probably corroded, but it might be salvageable. The power fist on the right arm is in better shape, its energy field generators dormant, but potentially functional. As they dig deeper, they uncover the chapter markings. The Dreadnought belonged to the Crimson Castellans, a chapter known for their stubborn defense of Imperial worlds and their preference for heavy infantry tactics. Not that this means anything to the Orks, who have no idea what the symbol represents and wouldn't care even if they did. To them, it's just decoration, perhaps something they'll paint over once they've claimed this machine for their own. By late afternoon, they've cleared enough dirt to see the full form of their prize. It's magnificent in its own brutal way, a killing machine crafted with care by artisans who understood that their creation would serve for centuries. The armor shows its age, pitted and weathered, but the underlying structure seems sound. There's no obvious catastrophic damage, nothing that would explain why it was abandoned rather than recovered. Griznak orders his Gretchen to start cleaning the external surfaces. They scramble over the Dreadnought like insects, scrubbing away accumulated grime with rags and brushes. As they work, more details emerge. Purity seals bearing prayers to the Emperor, now faded and brittle. Battle damage from conflicts long forgotten. Scorch marks and gouges telling stories of desperate fights. A nameplate on the sarcophagus, the engraved letters worn almost smooth, barely legible. Brother Castiel, honored ancient. The name means nothing to the Orks, but Griznak commits it to memory anyway. He's learned that human machines sometimes have names, and knowing them can be useful when trying to figure out how they work. Not that he expects this particular piece of information to help, but you never know. As the external cleaning progresses, Grisnak begins a more detailed examination. He taps on armor plates, listening to the sound they make, trying to judge their integrity. He peers into access panels, looking for obvious damage to internal systems. He traces power conduits with his fingers, following their paths from the central power plant to the various subsystems. His genetic knowledge of machinery guides him, letting him make sense of construction methods that should be utterly alien to him. What he finds is encouraging. The Dreadnought is old, yes, and it's been buried for a very long time, but it's also Imperial construction, which means it was built to last. Yet the components are robust, over-engineered to survive harsh conditions and continue functioning even when damaged. There's corrosion, certainly, and some seals have degraded, letting moisture seep into areas that should be dry. But the core systems, the really important bits, they look like they might still work. The power plant is the first thing Grisnak checks. It's a micro-fusion reactor, the kind that Imperial technology uses for everything from spacecraft to heavy vehicles. The containment vessel seems intact, no cracks or leaks that he can see. The fuel cells are depleted, run down to almost nothing over the centuries, but not completely empty. A good mech boy could probably coax them back to life, get the reactor running again, though it would take time and care. The weapon systems are next. The assault cannon is a loss. As Grisnak decides after a thorough examination, water has gotten into the firing mechanism and rusted it beyond reasonable repair. He could probably cannibalize it for parts, use them to build something else, but the weapon itself won't fire again without being essentially rebuilt from scratch. The power fist is more promising. The energy field generators are sealed units, protected from the elements, and they show no obvious signs of damage. With power flowing to them, they'd probably work. Then there's the sarcophagus itself, the armored chamber containing what's left of the pilot. Grisnak approaches it with more caution than he's shown the rest of the machine. He's heard stories about what happens when you mess with the insides of these things. Or Orks who've cracked open Dreadnought sarcophagi have reported finding what amounts to soup inside, the long-dead remnants of the pilot having decomposed ages ago. But he's also heard stories of pilots still alive, still somehow functioning after centuries or millennia in stasis. He can't see inside, not without cutting through the armor, which he's reluctant to do. But there are indicator lights on the external surface, small diodes that glow different colors based on the status of internal systems. Most are dark, of course, but a few, just a very few, show the dimmest red glow.
You know, I have to pause here for a second because this whole scenario really highlights what I love most about Warhammer lore. Think about it, we have this ancient warrior who's been asleep for literally 1,000 years. And the first thing that happens when he's discovered is complete chaos. No diplomatic negotiations, no careful archaeological study, just immediate, inevitable violence. And honestly, that's so perfectly on brand for this universe. But anyways, let's go back to the story.
Life support minimal, neural interface dormant, power reserves almost depleted, but not dead, not completely shut down. There's someone alive in there. The realization sends a thrill through Grisnak's crude nervous system. But this isn't just a machine to loot and strip for parts. This is a working Dreadnought with a living pilot just waiting to be reactivated. The possibilities make his mind race. If they can get it working, if they can figure out how to control it, they'd have a weapon that could turn them from a mere warband into a real threat. They could take on bigger enemies, fight better battles, win greater glory. But there are problems. Big problems. For one thing, Grisnak has no idea how to actually control a Dreadnought. The neural interface that connects the pilot to the machine is far more sophisticated than anything he's ever worked with. It's not like a looted tank where you can just wire up some controls and start driving. The Dreadnought responds to thoughts, to impulses from the pilot's brain transmitted through the interface. And the pilot in question is a space marine, not an Ork. For another thing, if they do manage to wake up the pilot, he's going to be angry, very angry. Space Marines don't take kindly to Orks at the best of times, and this one has been buried for a millennium. He'll be confused, disoriented, and absolutely furious when he realizes what's happened. The first thing he'll probably try to do is kill every greenskin in sight. But Griznak is not an orc to shy away from a challenge. In fact, the danger makes the whole thing more exciting. He begins formulating a plan, thinking through the steps needed to bring this ancient war machine back to life. He'll need more power, obviously. The depleted fuel cells won't be enough. He'll need to rig up some kind of external power source, feed energy into the system gradually. He'll bring it back online piece by piece. He'll need to clean the internal systems, purge corrosion, replace degraded components. And he'll need to do it all carefully, which goes against every orc instinct, because one wrong move could destroy the prize they've found. By now, War Boss Grokfang has arrived to inspect the progress. He stomps up to the excavation site, his heavy boots leaving deep prints in the churned earth, and plants himself in front of the Dreadnought. For a long moment, he just stares at it, his scarred face unreadable. Then he turns to Griznak. "Can you get it working?" Griznak nods enthusiastically. "Yeah, boss. Gonna take some time, but I can do it. This here's a proper bit of kit, this is. Imperial made, built to last. We get it running, we'll have ourselves a right stompy killie machine." Grokfang grunts, considering. He's fought Space Marine dreadnoughts before, seen what they can do on the battlefield. Having one of his own would be valuable, no question, but he's also cunning enough to see the risks. What about the Yumi inside? He gonna be friendly-like when he wakes up? Nah, boss, Griznak admits. He's gonna be choppy, gonna want to crump us good and proper, but I got an idea about that. The Mech Boy's plan. Griznak's plan is ambitious, audacious, and almost certainly doomed to fail, which makes it perfect by orc standards. He explains it to Grokfang in broad strokes, gesturing enthusiastically at the Dreadnought, occasionally kicking a Gretchen who gets too close while he's talking. The first step is to bring the Dreadnought back online, but not fully. Just enough power to wake up the life support systems. Get the pilot conscious, but not mobile. This requires a delicate touch, which is not something orcs are known for, but Griznak is confident he can manage it. He's dealt with captured Imperial tech before, knows how to coax it back to life without blowing everything up. While the pilot is awakening but still immobilized, they'll have a window of opportunity. Griznak wants to use that window to modify the Dreadnought, add orc components, replace some of the Imperial systems with greenskin equivalents. Not all of it. He's not stupid enough to think he can completely convert an Imperial Dreadnought into an orc machine, but enough to give them some control, some way to influence what the pilot does once he's fully functional. The specific modifications Griznak has in mind involve the neural interface. He can't directly control the pilot's thoughts, but he thinks he can add a layer of orc technology between the pilot's brain and the Dreadnought's systems. Crude overrides, essentially. Ways to force certain actions, even if the pilot doesn't want to take them. It's never been done before, as far as Griznak knows, but that just makes it more exciting. Grokfang listens to all this with growing skepticism. He's not a mech boy himself, but he's been around long enough to know when a plan sounds too complicated to work, and this plan sounds very complicated indeed. What if Dayumi wakes up before you're ready? What if he just starts blasting everything? Griznak has thought of that. His solution is simple and brutal. We chain him down, boss. Big, heavy chains, lots of them. Even a Dreadnought can't move if it's got enough chain weighing it down. We keep him locked up tight while I work on him. If he starts getting too rowdy, we just cut the power again, put him back to sleep. And if that don't work? Griznak shrugs. Then we leg it, boss, and blow the whole thing sky high. Better to destroy it than let Dayumi use it against us. It's not the most reassuring plan, but Grokfang has learned to accept a certain level of risk when dealing with his mech boy's schemes. That's just how orc innovation works. You try something crazy, and if it works, you're a genius. If it doesn't, well, at least it was entertaining right up until you exploded. All right, he says finally. You got 3 days. Get it working, or we abandon it and move on. Can't waste time here when there's fighting to be found elsewhere. 3 days. Griznak's mind is already racing. He's calculating what he can accomplish in that time frame. It's tight, very tight, but orcs work fast when they're motivated. and the prospect of getting a dreadnought working is motivating indeed. He immediately starts issuing orders. Gretchen are sent back to the camp to retrieve tools and equipment. Other mech boys are enlisted to help with specific tasks. A work area is cleared around the dreadnought, giving Griznak's team room to operate. Heavy chains are brought from the Ork ships and wrapped around the dreadnought's limbs, securing it in place. Even if it wakes up, it won't be going anywhere. The real work begins with the power supply. Griznak cobbles together an external power unit from spare generators and looted Imperial power cells. It's a monstrously ugly creation, cables and wires running everywhere. The whole thing held together with welds that would make a proper tech priest weep. But it works, in the sense that it produces electrical current without immediately exploding. Connecting it to the dreadnought is the tricky part. Imperial technology uses specific power interfaces, connectors designed to deliver the right voltage and current without damaging the receiving system. Griznak has to jury-rig adapters, matching his crude Ork power supply to the sophisticated Imperial sockets. It takes hours of testing and adjustment, with several near disasters when he connects things wrong and sparks fly. But eventually, finally, he gets power flowing into the dreadnought. Just a trickle at first, barely enough to make the indicator lights glow a bit brighter. He watches those lights carefully, reading them with his genetically encoded knowledge of machinery, life support coming online, neural interface initializing, internal diagnostics beginning to run. Inside the sarcophagus, after a millennium of darkness, things are starting to happen. The nutrient fluids that preserve what's left of the pilot's flesh begin to circulate again, slow at first, but gradually increasing. Sensors that have been dormant for 1,000 years start sending signals. The neural interface, that crucial link between brain and machine, begins to come back online. And deep in the preserved remains of a brain that has dreamed for centuries, consciousness begins to stir. Brother Castiel, ancient warrior of the Crimson Castellans, begins to wake. At first, it's just sensation without understanding, pressure, temperature, or the vague awareness that something is happening. His mind, sluggish from the long sleep, struggles to make sense of input that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. He's forgotten, in the long darkness, what it feels like to be conscious. He's forgotten that he exists. But slowly, painfully, memory returns. Not specific memories at first, not events or faces or names. Just the fundamental knowledge of self. He is. He exists. He is Brother Castiel. He is a space marine. He is a warrior of the Emperor. With identity comes purpose. He was fighting. He remembers fighting. There was a battle, desperate and bloody, against greenskins who swarmed across the fortifications like a tide of muscle and crude violence. He remembers giving the order to fall back, to retreat to the secondary position. Yet he remembers his dreadnought systems failing, the power cells depleted, the motive units seizing up. He remembers the darkness closing in. How long has he been asleep? It feels like moments in eternity at the same time. His internal chronometer, part of the dreadnought systems, should tell him, but it's not responding yet. Too many systems still offline, still initializing, still struggling back to life after their long dormancy. External sensors are the first to come online fully. He can see again, or at least the dreadnought's optical systems can transmit images to his brain. The view is confusing at first, distorted, colors washed out, focus uncertain. But it clears gradually, resolving into a picture of the world outside his armored shell. What he sees makes no sense. He's surrounded by Orks. That part he understands. But they're not attacking. They're working on him, their crude hands manipulating cables and equipment connected to his chassis. One of them, a mech boy by the look of him, is peering at a readout panel on the dreadnought's side, reading the diagnostic displays with an expression of intense concentration. Castiel tries to move and discovers he can't. His limbs are bound, heavy chains wrapped around them, holding them immobile. He tries to speak, to activate his vox speakers and demand an explanation, but his voice systems aren't responding either. He's awake but helpless, able to see and hear, but unable to act. Panic starts to set in. After a millennium of sleep, to wake to this, to find himself prisoner of the very creatures he was fighting, surrounded by them, at their mercy. It's intolerable. It's a nightmare made real. He strains against his bonds, trying to move through sheer force of will, but the chains hold firm and his motive systems are still offline. Outside, Grisnak notices the increased activity on his monitoring equipment. The Dreadnought's power consumption is spiking as the pilot tries to move. The neural interface is showing unusual activity patterns, probably indicating distress or anger. Good. That means the ancient warrior is awake and aware. Now comes the really dangerous part. "Right, lads!" Grisnak calls to his team of mech boys and Gretchen. "He's waking up. Time to get to work on the modifications. Remember, quick and quiet like. We don't want him getting too worked up before we're ready." They swarm over the Dreadnought like ants on carrion, each focused on their assigned task. Some are installing crude sensor overrides, or Ork devices that will intercept and modify the data flowing to the pilot's brain. Others are working on the weapon systems, adding manual controls that will let them fire the Dreadnought's guns remotely if needed. Still others are welding additional armor plates onto the exterior, Ork-forged metal that clashes visually with the Imperial aesthetics, but adds protection. Inside his sarcophagus, Castiel watches all this through his external senses and feels horror growing within him. They're modifying him. These Xenos filth are defiling the sacred machine that has been his body for so long. It's violation of the worst kind, desecration of both the mechanical and the spiritual. He redoubles his efforts to break free, to activate his weapons, to do something, anything, to stop this. But he's still too weak. Yeah, the power flowing into his systems is barely enough to maintain consciousness and run the basic sensors. His weapons are completely offline. His motive systems show as damaged in his diagnostic feeds, probably from whatever caused him to fall in the first place. He's trapped, utterly and completely, watching as these crude creatures do things to him that no machine should have to endure. Time passes in a haze of frustration and rage. Castiel watches the Orks work, memorizing their positions, their numbers, planning what he'll do when he's free. Because he will get free. Somehow, some way, he'll break these chains and he'll make them pay for this desecration. Every single one of them will die screaming, torn apart by his power fist or shredded by his guns. This he vows, Grisnak vows. As unaware of the burning hatred focusing on him from inside the Dreadnought, continues his work with growing satisfaction. The modifications are going well, better than he expected. The Imperial technology is actually quite adaptable once you stop worrying about doing things the proper way. He's managed to tap into the weapon control systems, giving himself override capability. He's installed sensor spoofs that can fool the pilot into seeing things that aren't there. He's even managed to add a crude off switch to the motive systems, a way to paralyze the Dreadnought remotely if it becomes necessary. It's all very rough, very crude compared to the sophisticated Imperial engineering surrounding it. But it should work, and in the Ork world, should work is good enough. As the sun sets on the first day of the 3-day deadline, Grisnak calls a halt to the work. His team is exhausted, even by Ork standards, and working tired is how you make mistakes. Better to rest, come back fresh in the morning. He posts guards around the Dreadnought, boys with big shooters, who are told in no uncertain terms that if the thing moves even slightly, they're to open fire and run. Inside the sarcophagus, Castiel spends the night in a state of barely controlled fury. His systems are gradually coming back online as more power flows through them, but slowly, agonizingly slowly. He uses the time to run diagnostics, to assess his capabilities, to prepare for the moment when he'll finally be able to act. The battle readiness protocols are buried deep in his mind, encoded there through centuries of service. Assess the enemy, count their numbers, identify their weapons, and note their positions and patterns. find weaknesses, plan the attack. He goes through it all methodically, forcing himself to think tactically rather than just raging at his helplessness. He counts approximately 40 orcs in the immediate area, with many more scattered around what looks like a temporary camp a few hundred meters away. The guards posted near him carry crude weapons, heavy stubbers, and the orc equivalent of heavy bolters. Dangerous to infantry, but not to dreadnought armor. The mech boy who seems to be in charge is the real threat, the one who understands enough about technology to have done this to him. Kill the mech boy first. That's the priority. Without him, the other orcs won't know how to maintain the modifications they've made, won't be able to control him. Then systematically eliminate the others. Is starting with those closest and working outward. Don't let any escape to warn the main camp. Total annihilation. It's a good plan. It makes him feel better to have a plan. Now all he needs is the ability to execute it. Catastrophic activation. The second day dawns with a particularly vivid sunrise, the rusty sky turning shades of orange and red that would be beautiful if there was anyone present capable of appreciating beauty. The orcs wake with their usual racket, shouting and fighting and generally making enough noise to wake the dead, which, in a sense, they're about to do. Grisnak arrives at the worksite early, eager to continue his modifications. He slept surprisingly well for an orc working on a project this complex, his dreams filled with visions of the Dreadnought stomping across battlefields, smashing enemies under its mighty fists. In his dreams, he's riding on top of it, directing its fury, the envy of all other mech boys. Reality, he knows, will probably be messier than his dreams. It usually is. But that doesn't dampen his enthusiasm as he examines the work from the previous day and plans the next steps. The power feed needs to be increased. The Dreadnought is drawing more energy now as more systems come online, and his jury-rigged power supply is struggling to keep up. He adjusts the output, feeding more voltage into the machine, watching the indicator lights pulse brighter in response. The internal temperature starts to climb as dormant systems warm up and begin functioning. Life support is fully active now. The neural interface shows green across all boards. Weapons systems are initializing. This last part makes Grisnak nervous. Once the weapons come online, the Dreadnought will be dangerous even chained down. The assault cannon might be jammed, but the power fist could still lash out. And those chains are good, but not indestructible. He double-checks his override controls, making sure he can shut down the weapons remotely if he needs to. Inside the sarcophagus, Castiel feels power flooding into his systems like warmth returning to frozen limbs. It's glorious. After the long weakness, the enforced helplessness, to feel his Dreadnought body responding again fills him with savage joy. His weapon systems are coming online. Targeting sensors activate, painting icons across his vision. The Power Fist's energy field generators are charging. He's building up the power needed to create the destructive field that makes the weapon so deadly. He's still chained, but chains are just metal, and he's killed things much tougher than metal. He begins to strain against his bonds, not with the desperate thrashing of before, but with measured force, testing their strength, finding their weak points. Outside, one of the orcs notices the chains starting to shift. "Oi, boss! It's moving!" Grisnak looks up from his work to see the Dreadnought's power fist, slowly clenching despite the chains wrapped around it. The metal links are creaking, straining against force they were never designed to resist. His eyes widen. It's too soon. The modifications aren't complete. He's not ready for this. "Shut it down!" he yells to the Gretchen manning the power supply. "Cut the power, now!" But the Gretchen, in their typical incompetent fashion, panic and pull the wrong lever. Instead of cutting power, they increase it, flooding the Dreadnought with even more energy. Every system that was still dormant suddenly surges to life. The motive systems engage. The targeting systems lock on. And deep in the core of the machine, the reactor achieves criticality and begins running on its own power. The Dreadnought explodes into motion. Castiel roars in triumph as he feels his full strength return. The chains that bound him might as well be made of paper for all the resistance they offer against the power of his limbs. The Power Fist's energy field activates, the air around it shimmering with barely contained force. He brings the fist down on the chains binding his other arm, and they shatter like glass. The orcs scatter, screaming warnings and curses, reaching for weapons. But they're too slow. A dreadnought is not a fast machine, but when it has the initiative, and its opponents are caught by surprise, it's fast enough. Castiel's assault cannon swings toward the fleeing orcs. He knows it's jammed, can see the error codes in his diagnostic readout, but maybe, just maybe, he can clear it. He activates the firing sequence. The weapon spins up with a high-pitched whine. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, with a sound like a wet explosion, all the accumulated dirt and corrosion blasts out of the barrel, followed by a stream of high-caliber rounds that scythe through the orcs nearest to him. Blood and bits of greenskin spray across the ground. The orcs who survived that first burst dive for cover, returning fire with their own weapons. Bullets patter against Castiel's armor like rain, doing no damage, barely even scratching the paint. He laughs, and the sound that comes out through his vox speakers is like metal grinding against metal, harsh and terrible. This is what he was made for. This is his purpose. Not to sleep in darkness, but to fight, to kill, to bring the Emperor's wrath to those who would stand against humanity. The long sleep falls away like a bad dream. He is Brother Castiel, ancient of the Crimson Castellans, and he is glorious in his fury. He strides forward, each step crushing the ground beneath his massive feet. The power fist lashes out, catching an orc who was too slow to retreat. The greenskin's body simply ceases to exist, reduced to its component atoms by the energy field. Castiel pivots, bringing the assault cannon to bear on a mob of boys trying to set up a heavy weapon. They die before they can fire a shot, torn apart by the stream of shells. Grisnak is running for the camp, his short legs pumping furiously. He can hear the dreadnought behind him, can hear the screams of his boys being massacred. All his clever plans, all his modifications, completely useless now. The dreadnought is fully operational and completely beyond his control. This is a disaster of the highest order. He needs to get to Grokfang, needs to tell the war boss what's happened. They need to organize a proper response, bring up the heavy weapons, maybe even the looted tanks they've got parked behind the camp. A single dreadnought is dangerous, but it's not invincible. Concentrated fire can bring it down. They just need to regroup, coordinate, hit it with everything they've got. Behind him, Castiel is methodically slaughtering every orc in sight. His assault cannon runs dry after a few minutes of sustained fire. The ammunition hopper's exhausted. No matter, he has his power fist, and that's all he needs. He crushes orcs underfoot, swats them aside with his free arm, pulverizes them with his deadly fist. It's glorious carnage, the kind of battle he was built for. But even as he fights, a part of his mind is analyzing his situation. He's been asleep for a long time. His diagnostics tell him it's been 1,000 years, though that seems impossible. 1,000 years would make him one of the oldest dreadnoughts in existence, older than any save the most ancient venerable. Where is his chapter? Where are his battle brothers? Why is he alone on this Emperor-forsaken world? And more pressingly, how much ammunition does he have? But the assault cannon is empty. He has no missiles, no grenades, nothing but his power fist and the limited ammunition for his stormbolter, a backup weapon mounted on his chassis. He can't fight an entire orc warband with just that. He needs support. He needs extraction. He needs to contact his chapter and request retrieval. But first, he needs to deal with the immediate threat. And that means making sure none of these Xeno scum survive to tell others where to find him. He advances on the orc camp. The orc response. The camp erupts into chaos as word spreads of the rampaging dreadnought. Orcs grab weapons and pile into vehicles, racing toward the sound of battle with characteristic enthusiasm. This is what they live for. A proper fight against a worthy enemy. The fact that they're massively outnumbered doesn't concern them in the slightest. In fact, it makes it more exciting. Warboss Grokfang is already in his personal war buggy, a monstrosity of welded metal and oversized engines that roars like a wounded animal. He's brought his best knobs with him, the biggest and toughest orcs in the warband, armed to the tusks with their favorite weapons. If a Dreadnought wants a fight, he'll give it one to remember. They crest a rise and see the walking tank in the distance, surrounded by the bodies of dead Orks. It's turning toward the camp, clearly planning to bring the fight to them. Grokfang grins savagely. This is going to be good. "All right, you gits," he bellows to his nobs. "We're gonna show that Humie tin can what happens when it messes with us. Spread out, hit it from all sides, go for the joints and the sensors, and try not to wreck it too bad. 'Cause I still want to loot it after." The Orks don't need to be told twice. They split up, their vehicles fanning out to attack from multiple directions. Some head straight for the Dreadnought, planning to engage it in close combat where they're most comfortable. Others circle wide, looking to flank it and hit it from behind where its armor might be weaker. Castiel watches them come and calculates his odds. Not good. He's one Dreadnought against what looks like 50 or more Orks, many of them in vehicles that can match his firepower, if not his armor. His ammunition is severely limited. His power reserves, while stable now, won't last forever, and he has no support, no extraction, no backup plan. But he's faced worse odds before. Probably. His memories are hazy on the details, 1,000 years of sleep having worn away the specifics. But he knows Space Marines don't surrender, and they certainly don't run from Orks. If he's going to die, he'll die fighting, taking as many of them with him as possible. The first vehicles reach him, war buggies loaded with boys, firing wildly as they close. He smashes one aside with his power fist, the impact crumpling metal and sending the occupants flying. Another tries to ram him, and he catches it, holds it for a moment as the Orks inside scramble to escape, then crushes it like a tin can. But there are too many, and they're learning. They've seen what his power fist can do, so they're staying out of its reach, circling him, peppering him with fire from their crude weapons. Most of it bounces off his armor, but some is starting to find weak points. His sensors register damage to his right knee joint. A rocket punches through his less armored backplating, gouging into systems that weren't as well protected as his frontal armor. He tries to track them all, to keep every enemy in his field of view, but they're too fast and he's too slow. Dreadnoughts are tough and powerful, but they're not agile. Against a static target or a slow-moving enemy, they're devastating. Against multiple fast-moving opponents who know to stay out of melee range, they have disadvantages. Grokfang's buggy roars in from the side, and the warboss himself stands up, a massive power claw raised over his head. He's aiming for that damaged knee joint, planning to cripple the Dreadnought's mobility. It's a good plan, and it nearly works. Castiel sees him coming at the last second and pivots, bringing his power fist around in a sweeping arc. Grokfang ducks, the blow passing inches over his head, and his claw tears into the knee joint with a scream of tortured metal. Hydraulic fluid sprays out, dark and viscous. Warning lights flash across Castiel's vision as his right leg loses structural integrity. He stumbles, nearly falls, catches himself at the last moment. But now he's off balance, vulnerable, and the Orks sense weakness, like sharks sense blood in water. They press their attack, concentrating their fire on the damaged areas, trying to bring him down. A crude rocket hits his sarcophagus, the armored chamber containing his mortal remains. The explosion rocks him backwards, causes alarms to blare inside his helmet. Life support compromised. Armor breach detected. Emergency seals engaging. This is bad. This is very bad. If his sarcophagus is breached, yet if the fluids that preserve his body leak out, he's finished. Not even a Dreadnought can survive having its pilot die. But Castiel is not ready to die. Not now. Not to these creatures. He forces his damaged leg to move, ignoring the warning signals, pushing past the mechanical failures through sheer determination. His power fist lashes out again, catches another war buggy, throws it into a mob of boys, crushing them under its weight. His storm bolter chatters, its limited ammunition spraying out in controlled bursts. Each bolt round is a miniature explosive, and they tear through Ork flesh with satisfying efficiency. But there are still so many of them, and he's running out of ammunition, running out of power, running out of time. Then something unexpected happens. The ground beneath him trembles. At first, he thinks it's just his own weight shifting, his damaged leg about to give out completely. But no, it's something else, something bigger. A section of ground 20 meters to his left suddenly collapses, revealing a pit that wasn't there before. Out of that pit comes something. Another vehicle, but not Orkish. Imperial. A chimera armored transport. Ancient and corroded, but still recognizable. And it's not alone. The ground continues to collapse, revealing more and more of what was clearly once an Imperial position. Tanks, transports, even the skeletal remains of what might have been a basilisk artillery piece. All of it buried for the same millennium that Castiel was buried, all of it now exposed by the vibrations of the battle above. And in one of those chimeras, impossibly, unbelievably, systems begin to activate. Power cells that should have been dead 1,000 years ago somehow still hold a trickle of charge. An engine coughs, sputters, catches. Lights flicker on in the crew compartment. Castiel and the Orks all stop fighting for a moment, staring at this impossible sight. Then, with a screech of protesting metal, the chimera's hatch opens and something emerges. It's not a person, not anymore. It's a servitor, one of those half-human, half-machine constructs that the Imperium uses for mindless labor. But this one has been down there for 1,000 years, preserved by the same processes that kept the chimera's systems barely functional. And it's still following its last orders. Defend the position, it intones in a flat, mechanical voice. Repel enemy attackers. Defend the position. The chimera's weapons, rusted and ancient, are swiveled toward the nearest targets, which happen to be Orks. It fires. Ancient allies. The chimera's multi-laser is a wreck of corrosion and degradation, but it still has enough power to cut a swath through the Ork mob. Lass bolts, weaker than they should be but still deadly, scythe through green-skin flesh. The Orks, caught completely by surprise, scatter in all directions, not knowing what to make of this new development. More of the buried vehicles are activating now. Servitors that have been dormant for a millennium crawl out of crew compartments, their cybernetic components still functional enough to follow basic programming. They don't know or care that their masters have been dead for 1,000 years. They don't understand that the Imperium has probably forgotten this world exists. They just know they have orders to defend this position, and by the Emperor, they're going to defend it. Castiel watches this with a mixture of amazement and horror. These servitors shouldn't be functional. The vehicles shouldn't work. By all rights, everything here should have degraded into useless scrap centuries ago. But somehow, impossibly, they endure. A chimera rumbles up beside him, its servitor pilot turning its empty mechanized gaze toward the Dreadnought. For a moment, Castiel thinks it might attack him too, its corrupted programming unable to distinguish friend from foe. But instead, it simply takes up a position next to him, its weapons turning outward toward the Orks. Reinforced Dreadnought, it says in that same flat monotone. Provide fire support. Defend the position. Castiel could almost laugh if his Vox speakers were capable of producing such a sound. After 1,000 years, he finally has allies. They're mindless servitors driving vehicles that should have stopped functioning centuries ago, but they're allies nonetheless. The Orks, recovering from their surprise, rally for a renewed assault. But now they're facing not just a damaged Dreadnought, but that Dreadnought supported by 3 chimeras and a half-dozen servitors, armed with laser guns. It's still not even odds, but it's better than it was. Grokfang, watching from his war buggy, realizes he needs to change tactics. These ancient Humi machines are tough, tougher than they have any right to be. Trying to overwhelm them with numbers isn't working. He needs a different approach. Fall back, he orders, as much to the confusion of his boys. Orks don't retreat. It's not in their nature, but Grokfang is cleverer than most, and he knows when to regroup. We're gonna get to big guns. Let's see how they like a proper bombardment. The Orks disengage, pulling back toward their camp, but maintaining covering fire to prevent pursuit. Castiel considers trying to chase them, but his damaged leg won't support sustained movement, and he doesn't know how long his newfound allies will remain functional. Better to hold position, conserve power, prepare for the next assault. He opens a Vox channel to the servitors, not expecting much. Their programming is too simple for real communication, but to his surprise, one of them responds. Imperial forces confirmed, updating tactical network, awaiting orders. Tactical network. These servitors think he's their commander, which technically he might be. He's the highest-ranking Imperial presence on this world, possibly the only Imperial presence, and they're programmed to follow the chain of command. Status report, he commands, falling easily into the familiar patterns of military communication. The servitor responds immediately, its voice crackling with electronic distortion. Chimera 779er, operational at 30% efficiency. Ammunition reserves at 12%. Power cells degraded, estimate 6 hours operational time remaining. Crew complement, 1 servitor, designated 779er Alpha. Other servitors chime in with similar reports. It's not encouraging. The vehicles are barely functional, running on fumes and borrowed time. But 6 hours is better than nothing. 6 hours might be enough. Form defensive perimeter, Castiel orders. Concentrate fire on any enemy that approaches within range. Conserve ammunition. We hold this position until support arrives. He doesn't mention that support probably isn't coming, that his chapter might not even exist anymore after 1,000 years, that this planet is likely so forgotten that even if he could send a distress signal, no one would respond. These servitors don't need to know that. They just need to follow orders, and orders are what he's giving them. The Orks are already preparing their next assault. Castiel can see them through his sensors, moving heavy weapons into position. They're being smart about it, setting up behind cover, preparing to bombard his position before they come in close. It's a sound tactic, one that might actually work. He assesses his resources. 1 Dreadnought, heavily damaged but still functional. 3 Chimeras, barely operational but armed. 6 servitors with laser guns, against an entire Ork warband with vehicles, heavy weapons, and a cunning war boss. The odds, he calculates, are approximately 17 to 1 against him. Brother Castiel has faced worse, probably. He honestly can't remember. But he's going to face these odds anyway, because that's what Space Marines do. The bombardment begins. The siege Ork artillery is not precise. It's not meant to be. It's meant to throw a lot of explosives in the general direction of the enemy and hope some of them hit something important. Accuracy is for gits who can't shoot straight. Real Orks just need more dakka and bigger booms. The first salvo screams overhead and detonates behind Castiel's position. He is throwing up geysers of dirt and rock. The second is closer, close enough that the shockwave rocks even his massive frame. The third hits one of the Chimeras square on, the explosion tearing through its weakened armor and reducing it to scrap. Servitor 779er Alpha doesn't even have time to scream before it's vaporized along with its vehicle. Castiel catalogues the loss dispassionately. 2 Chimeras remaining, 5 servitors. The odds just got worse. He orders the remaining vehicles to spread out, to give the Orks multiple targets instead of a concentrated kill zone. The servitors comply without question, their vehicles rumbling to new positions. More shells fall. The ground around them becomes a cratered hellscape, each impact adding new scars to a planet already covered in them. Castiel tracks the firing positions through the smoke and dust, calculating trajectories, identifying the Ork artillery pieces. If he can take those out, the bombardment will stop. But he can't reach them. Not with his damaged leg, not on foot. The Orks have set up well out of range of his weapons, pounding him from a distance where he can't respond. It's frustrating, infuriating, but also tactically sound. The Orks aren't as stupid as most Imperials think. They're learning, adapting, using their crude cunning to maximum effect. Another Chimera takes a direct hit. Its power cells rupture, and the resulting explosion is bright enough to leave afterimages across Castiel's sensors. When the smoke clears, There's nothing left but a smoking crater. One chimera remaining. 4 servitors. The bombardment continues. And Castiel realizes he can't win this way. Can't just sit here and take punishment, waiting for his position to be reduced to rubble around him. He needs to take action, to do something to change the tactical situation. But what? He can't advance, can't retreat, can't effectively fight back. Unless he examines the ground around him, the freshly exposed ruins of the ancient Imperial position. There are trenches here, old defensive works that were buried but are now open to the surface. They connect to underground bunkers, storage areas, possibly even vehicle bays, and some of those passages might still be intact. All units, fall back to the bunker complex, he orders. We're going underground. The servitors respond immediately, their vehicles grinding into motion despite their damaged condition. Castiel follows, and his damaged leg nearly giving out with each step but still somehow holding. He manages to reach the entrance to the largest bunker just as another salvo of shells impacts where he was standing moments before. The bunker is dark, the lighting systems long since failed. But Castiel's sensors can see in the dark, and what they show him is encouraging. This was a command center of some kind, possibly the headquarters for the defense of this position. There are maps on the walls, faded but still legible, communications equipment, dead and corroded, and most importantly, there's another exit. The maps show a tunnel system connecting multiple defensive positions across several kilometers. If those tunnels are still intact, he could potentially move undercover, emerge somewhere unexpected, maybe even behind the Ork artillery positions. Well, it's risky. The tunnels are 1,000 years old, and they might have collapsed in that time. He might get trapped down there, buried alive in the darkness. But staying here means certain destruction, so really, it's not much of a choice. Follow me, he orders the servitors. We're going hunting. Above ground, the Orks are having a grand time. The bombardment is working exactly as planned, the Humi position getting blown to bits, and pretty soon they'll be able to move in and loot the wreckage. Grokfang is particularly pleased. This is proper warfare, using big guns to smash the enemy before engaging in close combat. It's almost civilized by Ork standards. Grisnak is less happy. He's watching his prize, the Dreadnought he worked so hard to excavate and prepare, getting shelled into oblivion. All that work, all those modifications, are wasted. When this is over, there won't be anything left worth looting. The thought makes him angry enough to kick a nearby Gretchen across the camp. After half an hour of sustained bombardment, Grokfang calls a halt. Time to see what they've accomplished. He leads a group of boys forward on foot, approaching the devastated position cautiously. The ground is churned into a moonscape, craters overlapping craters, nothing visible but smoke and dust. They reach the edge of what was the Dreadnought's position and find nothing. No wrecked Dreadnought, no destroyed chimeras, just empty craters and the entrance to a bunker that wasn't there before. Where'd they go? One of the boys asks, confused. Grokfang stares at the bunker entrance, realization dawning slowly. Underground, he says. The sneaky gits went underground. This is both good and bad news. Bad because it means the Dreadnought is still operational and they haven't killed it. Good because it means they haven't destroyed it completely, so there might still be something to loot. And even better, now they get to dig the Humies out, which sounds like fun. Get the boys together, Grokfang orders. We're going hunting. The tunnels. The tunnels under the battlefield are a maze of corridors and chambers, some intact, some partially collapsed, all of them showing the wear of a millennium's neglect. Water has seeped in through cracks, creating pools of stagnant liquid that reflect Castiel's sensor lights like oil. The walls are lined with pipes and cables that once carried power and data, now corroded into fragile sculptures. Castiel moves carefully, his damaged leg making each step a calculated risk. Behind him, the last chimera follows, its servitor pilot navigating by his lights. The remaining servitors march on foot, their lace guns ready, their expressions permanently blank. According to the maps he saw in the bunker, these tunnels lead to 3 other defensive positions, each several kilometers from the starting point. If he can reach any of them, he'll have new advantages to work with. Higher ground, better fields of fire, possibly even more buried equipment he can bring back online. But first, he has to actually get there. The first tunnel junction they reach has partially collapsed, rockcrete and soil blocking one passage completely. Castiel examines the remaining options, comparing them to his mental map. The northern route is still clear, and it should take him to a weapons emplacement on a ridge overlooking the Ork camp. Perfect. They proceed north, the tunnel growing narrower as they go. Castiel has to duck, his Dreadnought frame barely fitting in places. The Chimera has to be abandoned entirely, the passage too constricted for vehicles. The servitor pilot remains with it, following its last orders to the letter. After what feels like hours, but his chronometer insists is only 20 minutes, they emerge into a larger chamber. This was definitely a weapons emplacement, Castiel realizes. There are mounting points for heavy guns on the walls, ammunition storage lockers, empty unfortunately, and firing slits looking out over the surrounding terrain. He approaches one of the firing slits and looks out. Perfect. He has a clear view of the Ork camp from this vantage point, including the artillery positions that have been pounding his previous location. They're well within range of his assault cannon if he had any ammunition left, which he doesn't. But he does have an idea. The ammunition lockers are empty, but the storage rooms next to them aren't. There are supplies here, military equipment that was stockpiled and then forgotten. Most of it is useless after 1,000 years of storage. The food rations are dust. The medical supplies have degraded to sludge. But there are also munitions here, sealed in stasis containers, designed to preserve them indefinitely. Castiel orders the servitors to search the storage rooms, to bring him anything that might still be functional. They comply, dragging out crates and containers, opening them carefully. Most contain disappointment. But one, blessed Emperor, one contains shells for an assault cannon. Not many, maybe 100 rounds, but that's enough. That's more than enough. Loading the ammunition into his weapon systems is awkward without proper servicing equipment, but the servitors manage it under his direction. They're not tech priests, but they can follow instructions, and between Castiel's knowledge of Dreadnought systems and their mechanical precision, they get it done. Now he has ammunition. Now he has high ground. Now he has a chance. Below, in the Ork camp, Grisnak is organizing a tunnel expedition. He knows where the Humies went, knows they're down in those old passages somewhere. All he needs to do is follow them, track them down, corner them in the dark. He's brought boys armed with flamers, perfect weapons for tunnel fighting, and he's coming personally. Because he wants to be there when they crack that Dreadnought open like a can and see what's inside. They enter the tunnels with typical Ork enthusiasm, whooping and hollering, their voices echoing off the ancient walls. The flamers light their way, casting dancing shadows that make the passage seem alive. Castiel hears them coming. His sensors pick up the noise long before they're in visual range. He positions his servitors at the tunnel entrance to this emplacement, orders them to fire on anything that emerges. Then he turns his attention to the camp below. Time to even the odds. His assault cannon speaks, and it's a beautiful sound. The shells arc down into the Ork positions, explosive tipped rounds designed to penetrate armor before detonating. They tear into the artillery pieces with devastating effect, was turning crude Ork cannons into shrapnel. Greenskins scatter, trying to find cover, but there's nowhere to hide from his vantage point. He methodically destroys every artillery piece he can see, expending his precious ammunition with careful precision. Each shot is placed to maximize damage, to ensure nothing survives. The Orks are shouting now, running around in confusion, trying to figure out where the fire is coming from. Then his assault cannon clicks empty, the last shell fired, and silence falls. But he's done what he needed to do. The Ork artillery is scrap. They can't bombard him anymore, and judging by the angry voices echoing up from the tunnels below, they've figured out where he is. Time for the final confrontation. Grisnak bursts out of the tunnel entrance and straight into a wall of laser fire. Where the servitors have been waiting, patient and mechanical, and they execute their orders with inhuman precision. Lass bolts burn through flesh and cloth, dropping orcs in mid-charge. But there are so many of them, and the servitors can't kill them all. Flamers roar, turning the narrow space into an inferno. Servitors burn, their mechanical components melting, their organic parts cooking. They keep firing until they physically can't anymore, until their weapons melt or their trigger fingers char away. Then the orcs are through, and it's just Castiel and a horde of angry greenskins in a confined space. This is what he was made for. His power fist lashes out, crushing the first orc to reach him. The second he kicks, the impact sending the greenskin flying back into his comrades. And the third gets caught in a backhand swing that reduces him to paste. Castiel is magnificent in his fury, a whirlwind of destruction in the cramped emplacement. But there are too many, always too many. They swarm over him like insects, climbing his frame, trying to find weak points. Crude knives probe at his armor joints. A power claw tears into his damaged leg, and suddenly he's falling, crashing to the rockcrete floor with an impact that shakes the entire chamber. Grisnak appears, his face split by a savage grin. He's carrying a heavy wrench, crude but effective, and he's aiming for the sarcophagus. "I got you now, Humie. Let's see what you're made of." Castiel tries to rise, but his leg won't respond. Tries to fight back, but there are orcs holding down his arms. He's pinned, helpless, about to be pried open like a tin can. Yet this is how it ends. Not in glorious battle, but torn apart by scavengers in a forgotten hole in the ground. He prepares himself for death, for the final darkness. At least he'll go knowing he made them pay. At least he went down fighting. But death doesn't come. Instead, there's a sound. A deep, rumbling sound that makes the walls shake and dust fall from the ceiling. The orcs pause, confused, looking around for the source. Then, the wall explodes inward. The arrival. Through the dust and debris comes a sight that Castiel never expected to see again. Space Marines. His chapter. The Crimson Castellans, their armor bearing the same heraldry he wears on his own chassis. They charge through the breach in the wall, bolt pistols firing, chainsaws roaring, and the orcs don't stand a chance. It's not a large force. Just a tactical squad of 10 Marines and their sergeant. But against orcs caught by surprise in a confined space, that's enough. The greenskins die quickly, efficiently, their bodies falling around Castiel's prone form. The sergeant approaches, his helmet mag-locking to his belt as he kneels beside the fallen Dreadnought. His face is young, far too young, and Castiel doesn't recognize him at all. "Ancient One," the sergeant says, his voice filled with reverence. "We've found you." Castiel tries to respond, but his Vox systems are damaged. All that comes out is static and garbled noise. The sergeant seems to understand anyway. "We've been searching for you for 3 months, he explains. "The chapter archives indicated you were lost on this world during the Morak Crusade. When we detected signs of battle, we knew you must still be here." 3 months. They've been looking for him for 3 months. And the Morak Crusade was... how long ago? Castiel's chronometer finally updates with current date and time, syncing with the sergeant's armor. The answer makes his ancient heart skip a beat. 1,043 years. He's been asleep for over a millennium. The sergeant is still talking. "Your sacrifice here is legendary, Ancient One. The stand you made against the Orc horde, buying time for the civilian evacuation. They say you destroyed an entire warband single-handedly before your power failed. 1,600 confirmed kills before you went dark." 1,600. Castiel's memory is fuzzy, but he's pretty sure he didn't kill 1,600 orcs. Maybe 100, maybe 200 if he's being generous. But 1,600. That's absurd. But the sergeant seems to believe it, and so do the other Marines. They're looking at him with awe, with reverence, like he's some legendary hero from the ancient days. Which, he supposes, he is now. "Can you move, Ancient One?" the sergeant asks. "Our Thunderhawk is waiting to extract us." Castiel tries his legs, carefully. The damaged one is completely non-functional, but the other still works. He can crawl at least, can drag himself out of here with assistance. The Marines help him up, supporting his weight, guiding him toward the breach they made. Outside, he can hear the sounds of battle. The Orks have regrouped, are attacking the marine positions, but it sounds distant, muffled, less immediate than the fight he's been in. They emerge into daylight, or what passes for it on this world. The rusty sky is the same, but everything else has changed. The Ork camp is in flames, their vehicles destroyed by precision strikes. The tactical squad is providing covering fire, while their tech marine works to stabilize Castiel's damaged systems. And there, hovering overhead like an angel of death, is a Thunderhawk gunship, its weapons tracking across the battlefield, discouraging any Orks from getting too close. The extraction is quick and professional. The Marines load Castiel into the Thunderhawk's cargo bay with practiced efficiency, securing him for transport. The gunship's engines roar to life, lifting them away from the battlefield, away from the world that's been his prison for 1,000 years. As they ascend through the atmosphere, Castiel looks back one last time. Below, the Orks are already fighting amongst themselves and arguing over who gets to loot the battlefield. They'll never know how close they came to claiming a Dreadnought for their own, how close Grisnak came to achieving his mad dream. The planet falls away, becoming a rust-colored marble, then a speck, then nothing. Brother Castiel is going home. Aftermath and recovery. The journey back to the Chapter's Fortress Monastery takes 2 weeks, ship time. Castiel spends most of it in the vessel's machine temple, being tended to by tech priests who catalogue his damage with a mixture of reverence and horror. His systems are a mess, they explain. Corrosion everywhere, seals degraded, components operating well past their designed lifespan. It's a miracle he functioned at all. But they can fix it. They can rebuild him, stronger than before. Whilst the techniques they have now are more advanced than what was available when he was first interred. They can replace his damaged leg, upgrade his weapons, give him systems he never had before. He lets them work, drifting in and out of consciousness as they labor. Sometimes he dreams, fragmented visions of the 1,000 years he's missed, wars he wasn't part of, brothers he never knew, a galaxy that's moved on without him. When he finally awakens fully, he's in the Fortress Monastery's halls of heroes, surrounded by other dreadnoughts. They're all younger than him now, most by centuries. He's become what they call venerable, one of the ancient ones whose service stretches back into legend. The chapter master himself comes to visit, to hear Castiel's account of what happened. The ancient tells him everything, from the original battle to his burial to the Ork discovery to his final rescue. The chapter master listens intently, asking questions, filling in gaps. "You've served beyond all reasonable expectation," the chapter master says when the tale is done. "You've earned your rest, Ancient One. If you wish it, we can end your vigil, let you sleep the final sleep." Castiel considers this. He could stop. He could finally, after all these centuries, let go. Find peace in the Emperor's embrace, join his fallen brothers in whatever lies beyond. But he thinks about those Orks, about how close they came, about the threats that still lurk out there, waiting to destroy everything he's fought to protect, about the young Marines who look at him with such respect, who could benefit from his experience. "I'm not done yet," he says finally. "Oh, there are still battles to fight, still enemies to slay. I'll rest when there's peace in the galaxy." The chapter master smiles, though it's a sad smile. "Then you'll never rest, Ancient One. There will never be peace, not in this universe." "Then I'll never stop fighting," Castiel replies. And he means it. The broader meaning, the tale of what happened on that forgotten world, of the Orks finding a buried dreadnought and the chaos that ensued, is just one small story in the vast tapestry of Warhammer 40,000. But it illuminates larger truths about the setting, about the nature of conflict in the grim darkness of the far future. The Orks are often dismissed as comic relief, as the silly faction that provides levity in an otherwise dark universe. And yes, they're funny in their way, with their crude technology and their love of violence. Oh, but they're also genuinely dangerous. They're not stupid, not really. They're cunning in their own way, capable of real tactical thinking when they put their minds to it. Grisnak's plan to modify the Dreadnought wasn't just a joke. It was a real attempt to gain a strategic advantage, to turn an enemy's weapon against them. If it had worked, if the Orks had succeeded in controlling even a single dreadnought, the consequences could have been severe. Other mech boys would have studied the technique, refined it, spread it throughout the Ork race. Suddenly, every Space Marine dreadnought would be a potential liability, a weapon that could be turned against its creators. This is why the Imperium treats the Orks with such seriousness, despite their apparently primitive nature, because underestimating them has led to disaster too many times, because their ability to adapt and learn makes them more dangerous than they appear. The story also highlights the Imperium's relationship with its own history. 1,000 years is a long time, even in a civilization that measures its existence in millennia. Records are lost, worlds are forgotten. Heroes who made incredible sacrifices are reduced to footnotes in archives no one reads. Castiel's chapter remembered him, but barely. His tale had grown in the telling, embellished into legend, the truth obscured by time and wishful thinking. How many other heroes are out there, lost and forgotten? How many dreadnoughts lie buried on dead worlds, waiting for someone to find them? How many sacrifices have been made that history will never record? The Imperium is built on the bones of its past, on layer after layer of accumulated history. But it doesn't always remember that history accurately. It doesn't always learn from it. It just keeps building, keeps expanding, keeps fighting, generation after generation, until the details blur and only the broad strokes remain. And through it all, warriors like Castiel keep serving, keep fighting, keep sacrificing themselves for an empire that will probably forget them. Not because they expect recognition, but because it's what they were made to do. Because someone has to stand against the darkness, and if not them, then who? Historical parallels and precedents. The event we've described, while dramatic, is far from unique in the annals of Warhammer 40,000 lore. The galaxy is vast beyond comprehension, containing billions of worlds, and on those worlds countless battles have been fought. Our archaeological discoveries of ancient war machines are surprisingly common, though each comes with its own unique circumstances. There's the famous case of Bjorn the Fell-Handed, the oldest living Space Marine dreadnought, who fought during the Horus Heresy itself over 10,000 years ago. Bjorn is only awakened once every century, and each time he wakes, the galaxy is stranger than he remembers. He serves as a living link to the chapter's past, to a time when Leman Russ himself walked among his sons. But he also represents the cost of such longevity, the slow erosion of self that comes from spending most of your existence in frozen sleep. There are tales of chaos dreadnoughts discovered in ancient battlefield, corrupted warriors who fell during the Horus Heresy and have been lost to time, and some of these have been found by loyalist forces and destroyed. Others have been claimed by chaos warbands and pressed back into service, despite the insanity that typically accompanies such ancient corruption. The Orks themselves have found and looted Imperial war machines before. There are documented cases of Orks capturing and modifying everything from Sentinel scouts to Leman Russ battle tanks to Imperial knights. Their ability to make captured technology work through a combination of crude modifications and their psychic gestalt field should not be underestimated. In one particularly notable incident, an Ork mech boss named Grabzod captured an entire squadron of Imperial Thunderhawk gunships and got them flying, despite having no understanding of proper maintenance procedures. The aircraft looked like flying junkyards by the time he was done with them, covered in additional armor and weapons, painted garish colors, belching smoke from stressed engines. But they worked, and they terrorized an entire subsector until a Space Marine strike force finally hunted them down. If Orks can make Thunderhawks work, the idea of them attempting to control a dreadnought isn't as far-fetched as it might seem. The main difference is that a dreadnought has a living pilot, and that pilot is a Space Marine, one of the Imperium's finest warriors. Controlling the machine without controlling the pilot would be a challenge even for the most skilled mech boy. But the fact that Grisnak thought to try, that he had a plan and was methodically working toward its execution, shows the danger that clever orcs represent. If he'd had more time, as if the Dreadnought hadn't awakened prematurely, who knows what he might have accomplished. The fate of Grisnak. We should spare a moment to consider what happened to Grisnak after the battle. He survived, as orcs often do. When the Space Marines attacked, he was one of the first to run, recognizing that the situation had gone from bad to worse and that discretion was the better part of not getting shot. He escaped the planet along with a handful of other survivors from Grokfang's warband. The warboss himself died in the fighting, torn apart by bolt shells, and without his leadership, the warband fragmented. Grisnak attached himself to a new boss, never mentioning his failed attempt to control a Dreadnought, knowing that failure is not something orcs respect. But he remembers. He remembers seeing that ancient war machine up close, and seeing how it worked, understanding its capabilities. And he dreams, in his own crude, orcish way, of finding another one, of succeeding where he failed before, of having a Dreadnought under his command, a walking weapon that would make him the envy of all mech boys. Maybe someday he will. Maybe someday he'll find another buried battlefield, another lost Dreadnought, and this time he'll have learned from his mistakes. This time he'll be more careful, more patient, more prepared for when the sleeping warrior wakes. Or maybe he'll die in some other battle, his dreams unfulfilled, his name forgotten by his own kind. That's the orc way. You live, you fight, and eventually you die. What you accomplish along the way is less important than how much fun you had doing it. But the fact that he tried, that he came so close, all is a warning to the Imperium. The orcs are learning. They're adapting. They're not content to just use their own crude technology anymore. They want the good stuff, the sophisticated Imperial equipment, and they're getting better at taking it. This is the arms race that never ends. The Imperium builds better weapons, and the orcs steal them. The orcs develop new tactics, and the Imperium adapts. Back and forth, action and reaction, in an eternal cycle of violence that defines the galaxy. And somewhere in the middle of all this, ancient warriors like Brother Castiel keep fighting, keep serving, keep being the bulwark against the darkness, no matter how long the darkness has been there, or how tired they've become of holding it back. At the question of memory, one of the most profound aspects of Castiel's story is what it reveals about the nature of consciousness when stretched across vast time. He was asleep for 1,000 years. When he woke, the galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and dramatic. Technologies had advanced, enemies had evolved. The political landscape of the Imperium had shifted in ways he couldn't have predicted. But more than that, his own memories had degraded. 1,000 years is a long time for a brain to be in stasis, even a Space Marine's enhanced brain. Neural pathways decay, synaptic connections weaken. The very structure of memory becomes less stable over such extended periods. This is why the oldest Dreadnoughts often seem confused or disconnected. It's not that they've gone senile in the traditional sense. It's that their meat-based memories have simply worn away over the centuries, leaving only the essential warrior functions intact. They remember how to fight, how to kill, how to serve the Emperor. But they've forgotten why. Forgotten what it felt like to be human. Forgotten the specifics of their own past. Castiel is experiencing the early stages of this process. He knows he fought a battle. He knows he was buried. But the details are hazy, the emotions muted. It's like watching someone else's memories rather than experiencing his own. And this will only get worse the longer he serves. Some Dreadnoughts embrace this fading, seeing it as a necessary sacrifice in their service to the Emperor. If forgetting what it was like to be human is the price of continued service, they'll pay it gladly. Others fight against it, first trying to hold on to their humanity even as it slips away year by year. Both paths lead to the same place eventually, to a state where the distinction between marine and machine becomes meaningless. This raises philosophical questions that the Imperium generally doesn't like to contemplate. At what point does a dreadnought stop being a person and become simply a weapon that can think? When the last memory of family fades? When they can no longer remember their own original face? When they've forgotten everyone they ever knew in their mortal life? And if a dreadnought does reach that point, is it mercy to deactivate them? Or is it duty to keep them fighting regardless of what it costs them personally? The Imperium doesn't have good answers to these questions. It just keeps building dreadnoughts, keeps interring its wounded heroes, and keeps waking them for battles and putting them back to sleep afterward. The needs of the many, it reasons, outweigh the psychological well-being of the few. If a warrior can still fight, then they should fight, regardless of how much of themselves they've lost in the process. Brother Castiel is caught in this machine now. He's been given the choice to end his vigil, but he's chosen to continue. Not because he particularly wants to, but because it's what he's been trained to do, what he's been conditioned to do over centuries of service. The concept of personal peace doesn't even register anymore. There's only duty, only service, only the eternal war. And so he'll keep fighting, keep waking for battles, keep sleeping between them, until eventually, centuries or millennia from now, and he'll wake one last time and discover that he can't remember why he's fighting anymore. Can't remember anything except that he must fight, because that's what he does, what he's always done, what he'll always do until the end comes. The eternal conflict. What the Orks discovering a dreadnought really illustrates is the fundamental truth of Warhammer 40,000. The war never ends. The conflicts are eternal, fought by beings who were created for war and can't imagine any other existence. The Orks don't want peace. Dreadnoughts like Castiel can't accept peace. The machinery of war grinds on regardless of who's feeding it bodies. The Imperium produces warriors, raises them from childhood to know nothing but combat. When those warriors fall, it encases them in walking tombs so they can keep fighting. When dreadnoughts finally fail, it harvests their gene seed to create new warriors who will eventually become new dreadnoughts. The cycle is self-perpetuating, designed to continue until the end of time or the death of the last human, whichever comes first. The Orks are born from spores released by dying Orks, meaning every battle creates the seeds of future battles. Kill an Ork on a planet, and you've guaranteed that more will grow there eventually. They don't need to be raised or trained. They simply emerge from the ground already knowing how to fight, already eager for violence. The more you kill, the more they reproduce. It's a cycle that can't be broken by conventional warfare. And so the two species clash again and again across countless worlds in battles that achieve nothing lasting. Territory changes hands. Victories are won and lost. But nothing fundamentally changes. The Imperium keeps producing warriors. The Orks keep growing from battlefields. The war continues. Brother Castiel is a microcosm of this larger truth. He's fought for centuries. He'll fight for centuries more. And when he finally falls, his chapter will find another warrior to enter in his dreadnought shell, and that warrior will fight until they fall, and so on, forever and ever, without end. There's a bleakness to this realization that the Imperium generally doesn't acknowledge. It can't afford to acknowledge it. If its warriors stop to really think about the futility of their endless struggle, they might despair. So instead, they're given purposes that transcend mere victory. They fight for the Emperor, for honor, for duty, for the protection of humanity. These concepts give meaning to struggles that might otherwise seem meaningless. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps the point isn't to win, but simply to continue fighting. To hold the line one more day. To push back the darkness one more time. To deny the enemy victory for one more generation. From that perspective, every battle matters, even the small ones. Every world saved is worth saving, even if it will eventually be threatened again. Every Ork killed is one fewer that's immediately threatening humanity, even if more will grow to replace it. Brother Castiel embodies this philosophy. He knows the war won't end. He knows his sacrifices won't bring lasting peace. But he fights anyway, because someone has to, and because the alternative is to surrender, and Space Marines don't surrender. Had closing thoughts. So what happens when Orks find a Dreadnought that's been buried for 1,000 years? Chaos, violence, confusion, a desperate battle between ancient warrior and savage scavenger. Improvised alliances with 1,000-year-old servitors, artillery duels and tunnel fights, and ultimately, rescue or death, with little middle ground between them. But more than that, it reveals truths about the setting of Warhammer 40,000, about the persistence of war across vast timescales, about the price of service when that service extends for centuries, about the ingenuity of enemies who are too often underestimated, about the weight of history and how easily it can be forgotten. Every world in the Imperium has stories like this. Battlefields where ancient warriors still sleep in their metal tombs, waiting to be found. Some will be recovered by their own chapters, brought home, restored to service. Others will be claimed by enemies, looted for parts, their pilots dying in darkness as Xenos hands tear apart their sarcophagi. And some will simply remain buried, forgotten, until time and erosion reduce them to nothing more than components in the soil. The galaxy is vast beyond measure. The wars fought across it are innumerable, and the heroes who fight those wars are legion. Most will never be remembered. Most will never have their deeds recorded for posterity. They'll simply serve, fight, die, and be forgotten, replaced by the next generation of warriors who will do the same. Brother Castiel is one of the lucky ones. He was remembered, he was found, he was rescued and returned to service. But for every Castiel, there are dozens or hundreds or thousands who weren't so fortunate, who still lie in the dirt of forgotten worlds, their service unrecognized, their sacrifices unacknowledged. And the war goes on. It always does. It always will. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And those who fight it, whether they remember why or not, whether they're celebrated or forgotten, whether they serve for years or millennia, are the only thing standing between humanity and oblivion. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it has to be. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into what happens when the Orks discover one of the Imperium's most ancient warriors, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. There are countless other stories in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, each revealing different facets of this grim and fascinating setting, and I'd love to explore them with you. Until next time, stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember that the Emperor protects.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any, and yeah, sleep well.